So, if you've been in the Smash community for just even a little time, you have probably seen screenshots like these float around. Often they're accompanied with a comment about how crazy the hitboxes in Smash 4 are. And at first glance, that statement might seem undeniable. After all, how else would a move be able to hit from so far away? Well, actually it has pretty much nothing to do with hitboxes at all. And the real culprit is a little thing called Hurtbox shifting. So, join me today as I explain why this, and this is completely normal. Now, you will be hard-pressed to find a single set of Smash where Hurtbox shifting does not come into play in some small form or another. While it's usually pretty hard to notice because of it happening so fast, it's something that, to someone who has never really looked into it in any detail, would probably not be able to detect. Which is why I want to go into as much detail as I can about it here, since this is also very much applicable to Smash Ultimate when that comes out. So anyways, I've talked about Hurtbox shifting before, but I never really went into that much detail about it. So before I get real gritty with it, I'll just start with a basic explanation of what I'm going to be talking about. Every character in really most fighting games that exists consists of what is commonly called a Hurtbox. This is essentially the character's body as far as the game is concerned. Hurtboxes come in many different shapes and sizes, and they usually only encapsulate the model of the character, with individual limbs having its own Hurtbox in a lot of cases. When a hitbox comes into contact with a Hurtbox, the character gets hit. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's get into the main topic of the video, because these Hurtboxes naturally enough move around with the model of the character, which then leads to these characters being able to be hit from ranges they usually wouldn't be able to. Now that is basically all you need to know, but I want to go into a bit more detail about the nature of this Hurtbox shifting and how screenshots like these happen. I'll also be looking at some strange cases of Hurtbox shifting and some other observations. Now, like I said, I want to talk about exactly why these screenshots happen, as it might not be entirely obvious at first glance. After a character gets hit, it takes quite a few frames, depending on how much hit stun the move has, until the character gets launched. In this time, the character can actually move around a bit through SDI. It's also worth noting that when a character extends one of their Hurtboxes, and that Hurtbox gets hit, the character does not move to the spot where the connection happened, but rather they get warped back to the center of the character's model, before going into the hit stun animation. So usually what happens with these kinds of screenshots is the following. A character shifts their Hurtbox by using a move, a character interrupts the move and the character gets hit. The character then snaps back to its origin point and enters the hit stun animation. And basically that's how you create one of these crazy hitbox screenshots. I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time since I've seen these screenshots over the years being blamed on crazy hitboxes when that is simply not the case. So next time you see one of these, you'll have the insight to know what's really happening. Now to look at two interesting and very commonly brought up cases of Hurtbox shifting. The first one I want to talk about is Bowser's pivot grab, because this is one of those cases where even in motion it looks ridiculous. And I do have a few things to say about it. First, when you look at the hitbox itself, you'll notice that the hitbox, while certainly huge, is not nearly as big as it's being portrayed in these videos and images. But when you apply all the things I said earlier, it makes a lot more sense. In most of these clips, Hurtbox shifting is very predominant. And like I explained earlier, this makes them snap back into the original position, making it look even worse. It's also worth mentioning that Bowser is moving backwards while grabbing, which further increases the distance between them, with the hitboxes tracing after Bowser. All this comes together and results in what looks like crazy grab distance, but is really just caused by Hurtbox shifting. Secondly is Pikachu's up B Hurtbox shifting. While not entirely obvious in action, when Pikachu uses up B, his model gets stretched far in different directions. And on some certain frames, his body is stretched to very extreme lengths, and his Hurtbox follows after this, which makes stuff like this happen, which is strange, but does make sense when you look at it. So up until now, I've really only talked about Hurtbox shifting that can affect you negatively. But the thing is that Hurtbox shifting like this can actually help you as much as it can harm you. In some situations, you might lean away from enemy attacks because of Hurtbox shifting. A very good example of this would be something like Falcon's F-Smash, which has a very notable lean back on startup. Other types of Hurtbox shifting might cause you to fall flat on the ground, reducing your Hurtbox. And some other moves can lift your body off the ground so grounded moves miss. The possibilities are endless. Perhaps something that is a little more interesting and quite a bit more rare is the Z-axis phenomenon. Now before I talk about the Z-axis, I have to remind you that Smash 4 is a 3D game. While all the action happens in 2D and it very much acts like a 2D game, it is a 3D game nonetheless. And since it is a 3D game, we have another axis to consider, the X, Y, and Z axis. In simple terms, this means sideways, upwards, and inwards, and the mirror of those. This means that, while quite rare, characters can lean into the Z-axis, and it can make hitboxes miss them even if they don't have any form of invincibility. Now, like I said, this is a very rare occurrence, and only really happens with specific hitboxes that are very slim along the Z-axis. It also naturally does require the character to have some form of hurtbox shifting that leans into the Z-axis. We have stuff like Cloud's up air, max down smash charge, and other various taunts, to name a few. It's very important to make the distinction between Z-axis interactions and simply bad hitboxes. Some hitboxes are deceptive, so do keep an eye out. The only exception to this is when playing on a stage where the characters are flattened, such as Flat Zone and Duck Hunt. On these stages there is no Z-axis to speak of. Now, before I end this video, I just want to cover some other stuff that I found interesting while we are on the subject of hurtbox shifting. The first is just a very strange thing that happens when a back air gets interrupted by another hitbox. For some reason, when this happens, if the move has a particle effect, it gets mirrored to the other side of the character. Which is really strange in and of itself, but this is also exclusive to back airs and does not happen on other aerials. While strange, the only real notable thing about it is that it can again make for some peculiar out-of-context screenshots. Second, I want to talk about glancing blows. Glancing blows are perhaps a lot more famous in Melee than they are in any other Smash game, as they do work a little differently there. In layman's terms, a glancing blow happens when a hitbox is very close to hitting the target, but it's just off. In Melee, whenever a glancing blow, or a phantom hit as it is commonly called, happens, the opponent would receive half the damage and not take any of the knockback from the move. Now, this was changed in later games, and in Smash 4 glancing blows work a little differently. They are now indicated by a single orange spark that appears where the hit would have happened, and they no longer deal any damage or knockback. They now just serve as an indicator to remind you of the times where you were close, but not close enough. Once you start noticing these glancing blows whenever you miss a move, it feels like even more of a slap in the face, honestly. Especially when you play characters like Marth. That is, actually the worst. Anyways, that's about everything I wanted to talk about on the subjects of hurtboxes and hurtbox shifting. I know this video was a little all over the place, but these are all things I've been wanting to talk about for a while now. And this was really the most natural place to do so, since those screenshots have been bothering me for a while now. And I'm glad I finally got around to making this. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this little insight into how hurtboxes in Smash work, and I hope you learned something new as well. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.